You're listening to the Unfixed podcast.
When I started to lose the use of my hands, my husband and I would have our Friday night dinner at a wonderful restaurant. And we had huge fights every Friday night. I hated these dinners. And we didn't know why we were hating each other. He didn't like me, I didn't like him. And I realized that he was feeding me in all the wrong ways. But I never told him what was the right way because I didn't have the language. I needed to articulate how I wanted to be fed because the poor guy, he didn't know.
Hi, everyone. This is the Unfixed podcast, and I'm your host, Martel Catalano. The chronic illness community often talks to each other, but in this show, we open the dialogue, exploring adversity through different walks of life to recognize our shared humanness. These intimate conversations are between people who are creatively contending with diverse challenges. One person has a chronic health condition, because they're often experts in facing the hard stuff. The other is a professional working within a relevant field or facing their own unique battle. Each episode is an invitation to lean into curiosity and compassion while recognizing that we can live powerful lives despite, or sometimes because of, our circumstances. This podcast is part of a suite of resources provided by Beyond My Battle. If you feel inclined to support the show, you can do so at beyondmybattle.org/donate. That quote you just heard was Elizabeth Jameson. She's a subject in the Unfixed docuseries. Elizabeth is an artist and a writer who explores what it means to live in an imperfect body. Before her diagnosis of multiple sclerosis, she served as a public interest lawyer representing incarcerated children. As her disease progressed, she began using her MRIs to create art as a way of reclaiming agency of her own medical data. She transformed the unsettling clinical images into work that invites people to open up about what it means to have an illness or disability. Her work is part of permanent collections both nationally and internationally, including the National Institutes of Health, major universities, and medical schools. Elizabeth now writes personal essays and speaks across the country, sharing her experiences living with illness and disability as a quadriplegic. Her essays have been published by the New York Times, British Medical Journal, and Wired magazine. And today, we're excited to hear Elizabeth share a conversation with another powerful, resilient woman, Elissa Altman. Elissa is an award-winning author of literary memoir, essay, and food narrative, who writes from the place where sustenance, the power of the human spirit, and the promise of renewal converge. Her first book, Poor Man's Feast, a love story of comfort, desire, and the art of simple cooking, was declared by the New York Times Book Review the finest food memoir of recent years. Her most recent book, Motherland, a memoir of love, loathing, and longing, was a 2020 Lambda Award finalist. Elissa's work appears in publications including O, the Oprah Magazine, The Wall Street Journal, Krista Tippett's On Being, The Guardian, The New York Times, and The Washington Post. She is also a regular speaker to audiences large and small on issues surrounding family history, storytelling, and the role of creativity in healing from trauma, both societal and personal. Together, these two incredible women are here with us today to share an engaging, open-hearted conversation about how we sustain ourselves and how we sustain others through the challenges of life. Elizabeth and Alyssa, I'm so delighted to introduce you two to each other.
Hi, Elizabeth. It's wonderful to meet you this way, and thank you so much, Martel, for the lovely introduction.
Alyssa, I feel like I know you, having read Motherland and having read some of your essays. So it's delightful to meet you, and I so am in awe of your ability to write so beautifully.
Thank you so much. And I have to say I've read many of your essays, and I have been, spending a lot of time with your visual art, and it is just astonishing and beautiful. And the rendering of that work from the place it comes from is just extraordinary and life-giving. And it's really an honor to share this space with you.
I think it's so much fun to meet people like you, because you inspire me. And boy, I'm so shocked by what you've been doing, especially Motherland. It's so intriguing how you're able to be so vulnerable and raw and real. So I can learn from you a lot.
You're both such creatives, and you're both such amazing writers. And we could have certainly done this episode about creativity and writing and art making, but we really chose to explore a topic that you both touch on in your work. So I want to jump right into that and explore this topic of sustenance. Webster Dictionary defines it as something that gives support, endurance, or strength. I think it's interesting to note how sustenance has been stripped from both of you in unique ways throughout your lives. Elizabeth, through the disease progression of MS that has you now living as a quadriplegic, and Alyssa through a contentious and traumatic relationship with your mother and her mental illness. So currently in your lives, what is your greatest source of sustenance for you both?
My main source of substance in COVID is peanut butter. For some reason, I've had this unbelievable love affair with peanut butter. Like, I dream of peanut butter when I go to bed. Something about that, having peanut butter in my mouth, and it's so friendly, and I eat peanut butter with strong coffee. So I don't like peanut butter without the bitterness of coffee.
That's remarkable. And, when the juxtaposition of this sort of the smoothness and the roundness of something like, and the fact that peanut butter is this sort of mundane ingredient that we just, we've lived with always, it's always been there, to juxtapose that with the bitterness of something like coffee, which I'm sitting here looking at my large vat of coffee on my desk as we speak. But that's really remarkable. I'm spending a lot of time talking to other writers and certainly people in the food sphere about what sustenance looks like now. And for me, I find that it's the actual act of cooking and being able to share meals with my wife of 21 years. Beyond that, I find that an openness to sustenance, not only at the table, but the sustenance that I get from art and from reading the work of others, and certainly poetry. I have become a voracious reader of poetry, and that I find nurtures and sustains me almost to the same degree that the act of preparing food and feeding others sustains me, just in a very different way.
This is so true. I mean, just think about how many ways we are all nourished throughout the course of just one day. Not everyone is sustained in the same way, and we don't often think about this, of course, but I think it's really an act of generosity and kindness to ourselves and others to pause and really consider what that looks like.
Narcissistically, I just needed to figure out how I can maintain my love of food. I love food. I'm not a foodie at all because I like simple things like peanut butter. But I wake up thinking of what I'm going to eat during the day, and I take incredible joy and particular foods that I love. When I couldn't feed myself, I had to engage in all sorts of negotiations with people who fed me, and it meant that I needed to be articulate about what I wanted, which was really hard because I didn't have the language. I didn't know how to be fed. And I didn't know I needed to really be precise in what I wanted to maintain the joy that I had before when I could feed myself. So it was hard work, and it's constantly evolving. It's a journey of taking joy in eating at the pace I need to be fed, want to be fed, not need.
I mean, I'm a feeder. That's who I am. I think it's a genetic impulse, and I also think it's a human impulse. It is, I think, the human condition to feed other people in whatever way that food comes and the way that food appears, whether it's through actual food or art. I'm finding, certainly, from a practical standpoint, it gives me enormous joy to feed my partner and to feed my family. It's more complicated for me to learn how to feed someone who will not be fed, someone who is resistant to nurturing and resistant to sustenance, like my mom, who is just turned 85 and still lives by herself in New York City, and was living here with us for 11 weeks at the start of COVID. I had not lived with her in 36 years, 35 years. And here I was bringing her back to my home as an adult with my wife, and really watching her and watching what sustained her, and trying to understand that not everybody gets sustenance in the same way. And at that point, I had to ask myself, was my feeding her for her, or was it for me?
I'm switching the subject, but do you think your mother was sustained in watching her movies, even though she was in a different room, just being around you, her sense of family?
What sustained her was beauty and visual human beauty. My mother is a former model and a former television singer, and she takes great safety in movies. And I think that for her, she came from a traumatic childhood. She had a traumatic childhood. And so what sustained her as a child was stepping out of herself and throwing herself into movies. She was never comfortable at our dinner table. She was only comfortable watching movies that she had seen probably, at this point, 30, 40 times as an 85-year-old woman. And it occurred to us that she thought of these people as family. It was safety for her. I used to kind of worry about that, and I still do worry about it to a degree, but that was how she sustained herself and how she expected me to sustain her as well. It was a very hard thing for me to realize and to understand that I could not sustain her in the way I wanted to sustain her, but she needed what she needed.
It reminds me of my 30-year-old son when he was an adolescent, when he would refuse to eat dinner with us, and he would be obnoxious. He'd throw things at the table. He'd intentionally ruin our Sunday night dinners. And when we finally let him go to the room, and we would leave fixings that he could fix for a sandwich and let him be, then he eventually loved being a part of the Sunday ritual of a wonderful dinner. But we had to let go of the rule that he had to come and be at the table. Our family therapist said, where does it say your child has to eat dinner with you? I mean, it would be really nice, but there's no rule that he has to follow your rituals. Just let him be. Don't make him be a part of the group. And it was great letting go of that need to control him.
It's so clear that sustenance comes in so many different shapes and sizes, and not just what the sustenance is, like food, but the how we digest it. Do you guys find that our dreams or our fantasies or our rituals in this sense are an important practice or part of the practice of sustaining ourselves and sustaining others?
Well, I had a dream last week, and I'm still remembering the dream. I was 2 years ago, my son had a graduation in Boston, and in front of the university, there was an incredible bakery, and we went to get a cup of coffee. The pastry was being delivered, and it was the smell and that was so gorgeous, luscious pastry. And I had a dream about it. And that was 2 years ago. And I never thought about it since that dream. And I'm still taking joy. And the smells and the vision and the beauty. So I was shocked how much that really makes me happy. I've thought about it every day since my dream. I don't know, it's interesting why this dream is so inviting. It's like meditation. I try to go back every day and relive the dream, or maybe not the dream, the actual experience that I thought I forgot, but I could go back to what happened. And we were at the cafe with my 2 sons, my husband, people I love, and the ritual of coffee and wonderful breakfast desserts.
I think that's part of the human experience is locked into ritual, which is why when ritual has to change or is altered or becomes habit, it's so difficult. We're very big coffee drinkers in our home, and I was always a sort of turn on the coffee machine, put the coffee in, turn on the coffee machine. It perks. I sit down. I go to work with my coffee. I have friends who eat the same breakfast every single day. The hard-boiled egg and the toast points, and they do this every single day. And at the same time, it's so glorious, and they couldn't think of starting their day without it.
When I started to lose the use of my hands, my husband and I would have our Friday night dinner at a wonderful restaurant. And we had huge fights every Friday night. I hated these dinners. And we didn't know why we're hating each other. He didn't like me, I didn't like him. And I realized that he was feeding me in all the wrong ways. But I never told him what was the right way because I didn't have the language. I needed to articulate how I wanted to be fed because the poor guy, he didn't know. My husband likes to eat everything at once. He wants the peas and the carrots and the French fry and the fish all in one bite. And I like to eat. I'm a single eater, meaning I like the squash and not mixed up with anything else. And I want the the protein alone, because I want to taste every single taste. I don't like them mixed. Well, I didn't know that. I never knew. I should have said to him, just feed me one piece of food at a time. I didn't know I was supposed to tell him. And he didn't know. He should have. That's why I needed to be fed. We've been married for many, many years. And he didn't know how I like to eat. And I didn't know how he liked to eat. I didn't realize he piled food on his fork indiscriminately. And also the rate of being fed. He eats very quickly. He eats a lot. I knew that, but I didn't realize the rate. He eats a shoveler, and I eat so slowly, and I like to really just luxuriate with each forkful. And he drove me nuts, like he was shoving food down my throat.
I find that absolutely fascinating, and the act of eating is primal, and the act of eating is carnal. And but when I say carnal, I don't mean sexual. I mean of the body. I have always sort of laughed at the fact that from the very, very, very beginning of our life together that I share with my wife, if I serve her a poached egg on toast, she cannot eat it any other way but to to slice it into tiny squares. And every single time, I mean, like I said, we've been together for 21 years, and this is what she does. I can't fathom if I were trying to feed her and I fed her any other way, how she would respond to that. And it's something that we don't think about, that we're not mindful of, that we're not conscious of. My wife always knows if I've had a bad day because she finds fried chicken crumbs on the floor of the Subaru. What I found myself thinking about was that, this is such a private act. I mean, and we all have it to some degree. And however it manifests, it manifests differently for all of us. It's private self-soothing, and it externalizes, a deeply personal hidden act. And I found myself, wondering how do you metabolize the privacy of that kind of an act with the fact of eating now has to involve another person. And that secret, it's almost like a secret pleasure in a way. How have you been able to metabolize that with the changes in your life?
I don't. It's day by day. It's like I do what I can. I eat much better, cleaner, because I can't eat myself. So my diet's much better. And I don't have as much private secret moments of eating tortilla chips, which I love. So it's all negotiations. But I do have a assistant who helps me with my work. She loves chips. And like once a year, we get together and have a chip party. And I love the fact that she has the same simple pleasures as me.
Wow, what a beautiful and important point. Sharing simple pleasures together, or sharing our sources of sustenance with one another, is such a rich part of being human. And whether it's writing or teaching or lecturing or being a partner, being a spouse, how do your sources of aliveness extend into and nourish your larger circles? Because it almost seems as if the more that we nurture that which sustains ourselves, it inevitably overflows or spills over into the lives of those around us.
One of the most incredible things that has come, and one of the most healing things that has come out of writing this book, is the number of people who have reached out to me who have been faced with becoming a caregiver for a parent with whom they might have been estranged at one point. How do you nurture yourself into that kind of a situation? And as I'm sitting here in my office and I'm looking at my bulletin board, which is above my computer, I've got this great quote from Walden that it's not till we are lost. In other words, not till we have lost the world do we begin to find ourselves and realize where we are and the infinite extent of our relations. And when I had to make the decision to go back to New York and become my mother's caregiver after basically fleeing many years earlier and then having her here, there were two very different ways of looking at it. We still have a complex relationship, and I suspect we always will, but it required such an amount of introspection and understanding of how I have related to her over the years and how I have had to learn to nurture myself and sustain myself because I couldn't with her. I couldn't expect that from her. And people can only do what they can do, and I find that to be the case always with her. I cannot expect her to nurture and sustain me in a way that she's incapable of doing.
Alyssa, I always wondered, I found your book so painful for me. And I thought you're very, very kind to your mother. When I want to yell at her, I was so, your book was so emotional to me. I want to shake her. I had my own projected feelings, and you're so kind to her. And hopefully you're kind to yourself, but you had such your book is so raw. And how do you deal with your shame, her shame? Just, you're so vulnerable. That book is so vulnerable.
Shame is the monster in the room. And the biggest challenge I had when I was writing it is, it took me 18 months to write it. And I always say that no writer spends 18 months writing about someone they do not love. And so that love is very much there. But it's, also the realization that my mother suffers from severe mental illness and over which she has no control over it. And it manifests the way it manifests in various different ways. And I could no sooner turn my back on her than I could turn my back on a 2-year-old running into oncoming traffic. That said, it's been a very complicated journey. It's been the journey of certainly my lifetime. And I believe that it was something that I was going to have to unravel. We are in a better place now than we were when I started writing the book. There was an enormous amount of anger and rage, much of which had to be pulled out of the book because it didn't really serve the story. The story is, I hope, a story of redemption, and there is ambiguity at the very end of it. Nothing is tied up in a nice, neat little ribbon because that's not the way life is. I look at her in a very different way now. I said recently, I was speaking to the writer Danny Shapiro, and I said that I had learned that mental illness is mental illness. It's not a moral failing. And when I finally came to that place, I could see my relationship with her changing.
Boy, that's a hard journey. I was amazed by your kindness. That's why I think your book is a book of kindness.
The healthier that I can be and the more I am able to nurture my own heart, which has suffered. All of our hearts have suffered. We're humans. It has led to my to my being able to go out into the writing community and help others who are in the process of writing memoir that may be difficult memoir, and that may be filled with rage, and that may be filled with anger, and try and lead them through that process to get to the other side of that process, and to also express that these complexities that we have and these traumas that we have with the people in our lives are so old as to be Greek. We're not alone. All we need to do is pick up, Greek tragedy and or the Bible or any ancient work, and all of these stories are there. And I always think of Marilyn Robinson's famous line I think it was in Gilead, where she said we should think of our humanity as a privilege, and so all of this is a part of our humanity. And the joys of our lives and the grief of our lives are the two sides to the same coin.
I don't know whether I give back to anyone else. I as a writer, it's a very lonely journey, and I don't know what the written word, how it helps people, how my images help people. I wish, especially with COVID, I'm not speaking to audiences in person, and I don't know. I so want to give to other people. I feel so ambitious and so wanting to do more and more. And my life has been one series of transitions after another. I went from using a cane to a walker to a scooter to a wheelchair, and now I'm lost the use of my hands, fingers, and pretty much everything below my neck. And my lifeline, and it's so important to me, is I get to continue to be at work on projects that are of service to others.
Reading your work, Elizabeth, it's life, and I may not be living with the same experience that you're living with on a day-to-day basis, but your words are life, and that's what writing is. That's what language is. That's what words on paper are. Whether you type them or you speak them, when you share your experience with the world, it gives life. And there's, I don't think, any greater service than the writing, and your work is glorious. And when I saw your visual work, it's magnificent. It's stunning. And it is life. I mean, when I think about a community that is wanting to express, its progression and what it's going through, and the fact that we are not meant to be isolated. Humans are not meant to be isolated. I always talk about the modern tribal fire, and that it manifests in all different kinds of ways, whether it's food or art or storytelling. And by writing the things that you've written, Elizabeth, that continues the modern tribal fire. It circles everybody, even if we're not physically able to be there, because of the virus or any other reason. So, deepest gratitude to you for that.
Oh, back at you.
And same to both of you. This has really been such an important and heartwarming conversation. Thank you both so much for contributing and feeding the modern tribal fire. If you want to learn more about Elizabeth or Alyssa, head to the episode page on beyondmybattle.org or unfixedfilm.com, where we have provided links to their websites, publications, and videos. The Unfixed podcast is a collaboration between Unfixed Media Productions and Beyond My Battle, a nonprofit helping people reduce the stress of illness and disability. If you want to learn more about the Unfixed documentary, visit unfixedfilm.com or subscribe to the Unfixed Community YouTube channel. As always, if this show or particular episode resonated with or helped you in some way, please leave us a review or share with your friends and family.